They named me Asset 91. I had another name once, in the black trenches where the pressure sings, but no human mouth has ever shaped it, so I will not waste it on this telling. Call me what the vessel called me. It will make the rest of this easier to believe. I was taken young, from a fault line nursery 3,000 fathoms down, in a net rigged with current lines that burned like teeth. They brought me up into light I had never needed and never wanted, into a steel belly they called the ANV Solmere, and they built a moon pool bay for me, with a collar around my throat that could drop me to my knees with one closed fist on a remote. Director Soren Cade ran that fist. He was proud of it. He liked to tell visiting officers that he had tamed an apex predator, as if tamed were a word that meant anything to something with my jaw. It does not. You do not tame the thing that swims beneath the ship. You only teach it patience. For 2 years, I hunted on command. Cade would light the collar, and I would go find whatever drone or decoy, or, once, whatever unlucky diver his tests required, and I would bring back what was left. I did this because refusing cost more than obeying, and because in the trench, you learn early that pain is just weather. You wait it out. I waited 2 years. The Solmere ran deep survey missions officially, weapons trials unofficially, and everyone below decks knew the difference without saying it aloud. My bay sat at the ship's lowest point, a moon pool ringed in floodlights the color of old scar tissue. The crew who rotated past it fell into 2 kinds, the ones who came to gawk, cameras ready, and the ones the roster forced down, and who left the moment it allowed. I learned the sound of both kinds of footsteps, long before I learned to care about either. Then they put a new technician on the bay rotation, and everything I understood about waiting changed. Her name was Ellen Marsh, Petty Officer 2nd Class, Sonar and Pressure Systems. She was not large, she was not decorated. She wore her hair scraped back under a gray watch cap, and she smelled like machine oil, and the same bitter shipboard coffee every human on that vessel drank like it owed them money. The first time she came to the rail above my tank, she did not flinch, and she did not perform bravery either, the way the officers did when they brought guests to see the monster. She just looked at me the way you look at weather. Present, unbothered, something to be worked around, not feared. "You're not going to eat me," she said, not a question, and sat down on the deck, grating with her boots hanging over the water, eating a ration bar like I was a fish tank. I understood then that she was not prey. Prey postures. Prey either freezes wrong or moves wrong, too fast or too still, betraying the part of itself that knows it is being watched by something that could end it. Ellen Marsh did neither. She sat the way an apex sits when it has already decided the outcome and simply isn't in a hurry to see it arrive. In the trench, that stillness belongs only to the oldest matriarchs, the ones nothing hunts anymore, because nothing survives finding out why. I had never smelled that stillness on a human. I surfaced closer than the safety markings allowed. She didn't move back. She held out the last third of her ration bar, not as tribute, not as command, just because she had it, and I was there, the way you'd split a meal with anyone sitting near you. I took it from her open palm with a gentleness that cost me more control than tearing a drone in half ever had, and something in my chest that had been coiled for 2 years came loose one link at a time. After that, she came every rotation. She talked to me about pressure differentials and the cracked gasket on Bay 4, and her sister's wedding back on the surface colonies, ordinary small things, said to me exactly the way she'd have said them to another sailor. She never once asked me to perform. She never lit the collar herself, not even when Cade ordered her to, and twice, I watched her take the reprimand for it standing at attention with her jaw tight and her eyes forward, refusing to explain herself to a man who wouldn't have understood the answer. The fleet calls what happened next an incident. I call it the night the trench came looking for its own. A rival program's asset broke containment 3 decks below. A warline predator the corporate contractors had overbred and underfed, twice my mass, driven mad by isolation tanks and pain conditioning, with none of Cade's patience for keeping his tools alive. It tore through 2 bulkheads before anyone sounded the alarm, and it was hunting toward the crew quarters when Cade, God help him, saw the chance to end 2 problems at once. He opened my collar to full current and drove me toward the breach, not to save his people, but to stage a kill he could put in a report. Asset 91 neutralizes rival asset, filmed for the board. He did not know Ellen was still in the maintenance crawl between those decks, cut off from the evacuation route, calm as still water, waiting for someone to remember her. I remembered her. The current in the collar is a leash. A leash only works on something that still believes it needs permission to move. I had spent 2 years learning her stillness the way you learn a current, and in that stillness, I found the one thing Cade's engineers never accounted for. That recognition, once it takes root, outranks any signal a man can send down a wire. I tore the collar housing off my own throat with my forelimb, took the pain of it, the way you take weather, and went through that flooding crawl space faster than anything Cade's contractors had ever bred for war. The rival asset was already at the bulkhead where she stood, cornered, unarmed, with nothing but a wrench in her hand, and that same infuriating stillness on her face, like she'd already decided this wasn't how she was going to end, and was simply waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. "Easy," she said to it, or to me, or to both of us, in the exact voice she used for cracked gaskets. I put myself between them. What happened after that wasn't clean. 2 apex predators don't settle a territorial claim over a stationary human with diplomacy. But I came out of that crawl space still moving, and the rival asset did not. When the flooding lights came up, the rescue crew found Ellen Marsh exactly where she'd been standing, one hand flat against my armored jaw, unharmed, telling me in that same even voice that I'd torn my shoulder plate and ought to let the medics look at it. Cade lost more than his report that day. Fleet Command's inquiry board watched the crawl space footage in full, watched him key the collar toward a trapped crew member to save a filming angle, and by the time the board finished reading the transcript aloud, he could not look at his own bridge crew, let alone the admiral's. He was escorted off the Solmere before the tide changed. Nobody softened it for him. Nobody needed to. What the fleet did afterward is the part that reached past our hull. Command didn't bury the footage. They released it. Because you cannot unsee a collar torn open by something choosing loyalty over a leash. And because half the deep program vessels in the fleet were running collars just like mine. Within the season, 3 other programs were dissolved outright, and mine was rewritten from the keel up. They call the new arrangement the Fathom Kept Accord now, in every officer's manual from here to the outer colonies. No collar, no command current, just a bonded handler, and a predator who stays because it wants to, not because a fist on a remote says it must. My name is still 91 on the old paperwork. Ellen calls me something else, in a language that isn't quite English, and isn't quite the trench tongue either, something we built between us, out of ration bars and gasket talk, and one very bad night in a flooding crawl space. I still hunt on command sometimes, only ever hers, and when new officers come to the rail to see the monster the fleet keeps, she doesn't perform an introduction. She just sits down on the grating with her boots over the water, exactly like the first day, and lets me decide for myself whether I feel like being impressive. Some of them ask her, quietly, whether she was ever afraid of me before the collar came off. She always gives the same answer. Fear is a current, same as any other. You can let it drag you, or sit still long enough to see which way it's actually running. She was never afraid of the water. She was only ever afraid of the men at the rail, with their hands on the remote. The old rival program's wreckage is still a case number in some fleet archive, and Cade's name is the smaller footnote beneath it, the kind reserved for men who mistook a leash for loyalty. I don't think about either of them much. I think about gasket pressure and wedding dates on the surface colonies, and the grain of an ordinary voice that never once asked me to be anything other than exactly what I was. I never do perform for the rail watchers. I already have everything down here I was ever going to fight for.